Hi, and thank you. What are you laughing at?
I don't know. I heard something.
Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays talking all things leadership, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And today we're going to be talking about one on ones, how to conduct effective one on ones, why they are important. I don't know why I continue to be amazed at the things that we bring up, but how many managers do not conduct one on ones. And so we'll talk about that, why it's important that you do, and how they are going to benefit your team and your goals overall. So, any opening thoughts on this, Robert?
You know, when I was putting together my talking points, I was like, this is really easy. But it is often the easiest things that get neglected. And so I think that as we go through this, I think a lot of people are going to say, well, that's common sense or it's very easy. And, you know, but the question I will put forward is, are you doing it?
Exactly. Well, isn't that the point? All of this is simple, right?
Right.
That is the whole point. All of this is simple. And it's a matter of making the decision that this is how you want to lead. This is how you want to manage your teams and manage your people and lead them. And once you make the decision, the things that you do are actually pretty easy. Not only simple, but most of them are easy, right? At the same time, acknowledging that leading people is not necessarily easy
Right.
because it does take some time. It takes intentionality, it takes effort, and it takes making space to actually do the things that need to be done. So,
Yeah. My first realization that people weren't doing this regularly, which is like the first thing I have on my list is, you got to meet regularly. Was years ago, I was really the one in charge of rolling out the performance appraisal process in my organization. And I was also in charge of making sure that the managers stayed on track, that they were actually getting them done by the deadline. So we had all the performance appraisals in. Any of the things that were not agreed upon were talked about between the manager and the employee. And I was stunned that the conversation that managers had with their employee for their annual appraisal was the first time that entire year that they were talking to their employee about their performance. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? So it's astonishing to me, but that was really the first time that I saw that, people really don't make time to meet with people to talk about their performance.
no, I was actually thinking back to my time as an employee, and I don't recall ever having regular one on ones. Um, not and quite frankly, not a lot of one on ones. I certainly had the annual reviews, and I will say this: there were other people on the team that I did notice had having them. Usually, they were newer in their positions, and I think there's something that happens if one is prone to doing them. They do them early in an employee's tenure, thinking that they need that kind of support. But the reality is that everyone needs that kind of support. Now, that here's the thing: you said you're going to talk about regular, right? Regular for different people on your team could mean different things.
Sure.
And I think that's important to to recognize as we get into it. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to be unlocking the power of one-on-one meetings, and we're talking about the importance of this. Why does this matter? It boils down to a couple of things, and I'm going to highlight these three: improved communications, stronger relationships, and aligned goals. And we'll talk more about aligned goals. It has its own slide, but when you are intentional about connecting with people and making a commitment to staying informed and providing information as well, right? And recognizing this is a two-way street. It's a one-on-one, it's a two-way street, and it can't help but improve your ability to communicate with someone when you are, and as you said, doing it regularly.
Yeah.
And that helps you to build relationships, which ultimately helps to build trust. And it's trust that helps bring together a group of people to coalesce as a team. And so not only are the one-on-ones important, and we're going to do a series on effective, well, I guess we could call it effective management, or effective leading, or leading effectively, however we want to put it. And there's going to be a section on effective communication in and of itself, right? And a session on effective meetings. And so one-on-ones are different than your meetings with your team as a whole, and both are crucial, right? So in your one-on-ones, you're talking about and making a connection and relating to each member of your team. And then you have to make time and space for your team as a whole as well. And so those are the things that will result from these one-on-ones. It's better communication, people feeling like they can come to you, particularly if you make a safe space for that. Improves your relationship, improves trust, and therefore improves the team.
Yeah, and in order to do those things, you have to, listen. I've had bosses that did not want stronger relationships with their employees. They just did not want to have a relationship. It was like, you do the work, and I'm the boss. But there needs to be a place for that. I mean, we're all human beings and we're social, and so we have to make those connections that builds rapport. And and when I start sharing some of the things from my list, goals are really super important. Aligned goals, I know you have a slide talking about that, but it's super important that you keep on top of the goals, and you make sure that you understand where they're headed, so that you can see how far or how close that employee is actually hitting those goals.
Absolutely. So about communications, that one of the things that happens is, and it happens easily, is misunderstandings, right? And so when we don't take the time to talk with each other, to listen, and got a slide about listening later, misunderstandings happen. Things get lost in translation, right? Things get left out. Tasks are not completed. Deadlines are not met. And so it's important that you are having this regular communication so that you can clear up miscommunications. I can think of times when I was working, well, still to this day sometimes, but particularly when I was working for other people, that I would get some directive, right? A task delegated, a project delegated. Someone would say, this is what I'm looking for, and think that would be enough. And I found myself there asking questions. And the challenging thing was that the person who was delegating the assignment often didn't delegate and stop to think about the kinds of questions that I might ask in order to make sure that I had all the information that I needed to complete the task, and that I was clear about what I was doing. And so this is another thing that this gives you an opportunity to do, is to make sure that there's clarity about things that are delegated, that the expectations are articulated clearly, and it also provides this opportunity for feedback, which again, notwithstanding people who don't want to have a relationship, here's the thing: you already have a relationship, right? So whether you want one or not, you already have one. So wouldn't it be best to have a relationship that is mutually beneficial for the two of you, the team, and then for the organization?
Absolutely. And just to make put a fine point on that manager, he even frowned upon us taking lunch with our coworkers. He was like, "You're not here to do that." And I was like, "Well, how am I supposed to build rapport with my coworkers if I don't spend some time with them?" It was very odd.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say with that one.
Exactly.
I don't even know what to say with that one.
Exactly.
So the next thing is preparation. And so here's the interesting thing, and I will say this, that there have been times when, like I said, I've had, certainly the last role that I had, um, very few one-on-ones. And to the degree that they happen, and I'm thinking of I had 5 bosses there in my time in that organization. And I can say that one boss in particular would call meetings for us to have what we would call a one-on-one. And there wasn't an agenda. There generally was not an agenda. And so I would go into these meetings not really knowing what we were going to talk about. They would be called sort of spur of the moment. Guess she had something on her mind that she wanted to talk about, but I never knew what it was. And therefore, I didn't have time to prepare or even know what we were there to discuss. And so it's important to I would say, to schedule the meeting, not do impromptu meetings. Impromptu meetings are something totally different, and there's a place for that. But taking the time to schedule a meeting and then have an agenda so that both sides know what's going to be discussed and can come prepared with items of concern, any updates, opportunities to share information, as well as sharing good things that are happening right now. All of this, this isn't only about performance issues, right, or productivity issues. That these can be used for reinforcing and reiterating what is going well. And I think sometimes there is a reticence to have the meetings because of conflict avoidance or wanting to avoid confrontation, and thinking that if I have these meetings, I'm going to be bringing up the things that are not going well. I don't really want to bring up the things that aren't going well because it's awkward and uncomfortable. but these are opportunities to share what's going well too. I was going to say what's going well as well. Um, what's going well, and so don't look at it as something that's about, accountability or chastising or just the negative things that are happening. This is an opportunity again to reflect on and review what's going well so that you can reinforce and get more of that, and to address those things that need addressing, and to make sure that your people are staying on task. And so having an agenda, not only as the manager, but allowing your employees to bring something or add something to the agenda so that they can talk about the things that are important to them is vital as well.
Yeah, and these first 2 points go hand in hand. If you're meeting regularly, is an opportunity to kind of front load that preparation. If you're meeting regularly and you have a regular cadence for these meetings and they follow a standard format, the both you and the employer are going to know how to prepare for that. When we talk about agendas, we need to share the agenda so people know, hey, these are the talking points, this is how you want me to prepare for this, so that time is going to be productive. And I think a lot of time people they don't want to do these meetings because they feel they're not going to be productive. And that's because they don't do it regularly, and they haven't streamlined their process because they're not doing them regularly, and they don't prepare properly. So of course, when they get in there, it's all over the place. And so I think that these two things go very, very much hand in hand.
And that's such a good point, right? Having an agenda, knowing what you're going to talk about, being prepared actually elevates the quality of the conversation, and it to your point, it makes the meeting more productive, which maybe for some people is counterintuitive, because productivity for a lot of people means doing the work, right? It is the action of doing the things, doing the work, taking on the task. And I would say take a step back and think about the benefit of planning, and how thinking things through ahead of time can help to streamline and actually make the time that you're doing the thing, that you're doing the task, actually more productive. So you can be more productive by actually working less because you're more prepared and you've planned more. And so it's, I agree that these go hand in hand, and being willing to give, again, space, creating space where meaningful dialogue can happen. You make that happen by allowing people to think about, well, this is what my boss wants to talk about. I can take some time to think about it, so I don't have to spend time in the meeting thinking about it, nor do I need to spend time ahead of the meeting stressing about what's going to be covered, and what's going to be brought up, and if I'm going to be called to task for something.
Right. And to your point, something you said earlier, it should be, it doesn't always have to be about developmental things. It could be about things that are going well. And so you can have that balance in those conversations. I have to tell you, I've known of bosses that did this at my last organization. It was mostly to tell people the things they weren't doing well, and they reserved those positive things for the annual appraisal. So it wasn't very effective.
I don't have the numbers on this, but one of the classes that I train around, there's a statistic. I wish I could pull it off the top of my head, but managers even with the people not being fans of confrontation or conflict, managers are more interested and willing to have conversations about what employees are not doing well than what they are doing well, which I find really odd. Um, because and and I don't know if if you work with any of your clients on strengths, the strengths based approach, and the more we lean into our strengths, right, we can move some of that other stuff out of the way, and so that managers would be like more gung-ho about the, the negative stuff than the positive. Just, again, seems a little odd to me.
Well, but to me, it makes sense because there have been plenty of times, and this may have happened to you, where you put together something, a protocol or something for a job. I remember I did one for one of the companies I work for. They had never seen it before. It was really, I thought it was really good. They asked me to do something, and I showed it to my manager. He was knocked out by it. He showed it to the CEO. She pointed to one missed comma. That was the only thing that she could focus on, was the one comma that I missed. And my boss, and he came back and he got on my case. And it was funny. And he said, this is, the content is excellent, but we don't care about that here. You have to make sure that whatever you present is perfect. And that was when I started coming to the conclusion that many organizations that focus on perfection are far from it, because they focus on perfection. They don't allow for, people to make those errors. So people spend more time, and we talk about this, pretending that it wasn't them, or, completely hiding any mistakes they make, or not bringing anything to the organization, because they're afraid it's going to be adjudicated that way.
Right. And that's sad. It's completely sad.
It was an awful experience.
I didn't work for this person directly, but I worked with people who worked for this person, and notorious for the redlining. She actually used a different color. I won't name the color. But because then it'll be obvious who it is. But it's basically redlining, and like taking great glee, it seemed, in like just highlighting everything that could be a problem. So, and you're right, when you create an environment where people don't feel like they can make mistakes, what tends to happen is that they make more mistakes because of the pressure to be perfect, and then they're hiding them. They're looking for ways to either scapegoat, throw other people under the bus, or to hide what they've done. So, all right. Well, with that said, that moves to the next one, which is active listening.
I love that.
Active listening. And so being someone who actively listens, and this is a skill that a lot of I will own this, that is a challenging one to develop, because we are listening to respond, right? And often we are listening to show that we know something, that we're right, etc., and not actually listening so that we can understand where someone else is coming from. And it is, there's some simple things that can be done to make this happen for you to develop this skill. But it starts with deciding that you want to be an active, engaged listener. And I like actually the term engaged listener as much as active listener, right? That you are fully engaged with the person who's speaking, that you are working to understand their message. Communication is a two-way street. There's a messenger and a receiver, right? The person who is communicating something, whether it's written or spoken, and then the person who's receiving that. And it's not effective communication until the receiver actually receives the message as intended.
This is so important. And I had a conversation with someone recently, and it reminded me of all the times I've taught active listening. Active listening is a subject that I frequently put in my workshops because it's so important. Whether it's leadership, whether it's customer service, whether it's giving and receiving feedback, it's usually it's in 99% of the workshops that I've developed. And I remember teaching this and telling people the first step in this is keeping the focus on the person that is talking. And you would be surprised at how many people, when someone is telling them a story, they're trying to wrestle the focus off of that person. And they think they're just relating. They're like, oh, yeah, that happened to me. And then they spend an equal amount or more time talking about the thing that happened to them and not what the person came to them. The person that was concerned about something came to them with. So I frequently point that out to people, and people struggle with that.
That's a good point. And what I just heard you say is that there's a desire. So here's the good part of this, right? There's a desire to relate to the person who's speaking. And so in that attempt, you bring forth a common experience, a similar experience, something, right, that it is meant to help you relate. The problem with that, however, is that whatever that example is, or whatever the story or the narrative that's being shared, maybe it's not about the experience, that there's an underlying message that you miss because you take the conversation in a different direction based on what you got out of your situation or experience. And what will often happen is that you will then dampen the other person's enthusiasm for continuing, and they will retreat and ultimately not continue to share what they were saying. I'll share a story. So years ago, we were having a holiday party. The employer that I worked for, we were having a holiday party, and staff was sitting in rounds. And I was sitting at a round, I think there were like 8 of us, and we were talking about, or someone at the table was mentioning a vacation that they had recently come back from, and they were sharing the story. And our boss was sitting at the table, or at some point in that conversation came and sat at the table and totally took over the conversation by sharing his vacation that had been in the same place. And while it's appropriate, I think, for when you're having conversation, for people to share stories and similarities, etc., I think what he did was, one, he interrupted the person who was telling the story, right? And it really just sort of dampened everyone's enthusiasm for continuing that topic. And he was actually someone who was known for doing that. So, interestingly enough, he was one of the bosses that I had that I never had a one-on-one with, which is probably a good thing. We had interactions at various times, and but we never had a scheduled one-on-one. And I certainly think, given the nature of the relationship that we had, it wasn't the best working relationship I've ever had. And I think part of that was that we weren't ever on the same page.
Mhm.
And part of that would be that we were not having one-on-ones. And so we never really had an opportunity to get clear about what he wanted from me, what he expected from me. This is also the person who, when I had my annual review, I think he only did one for me. That he started it off by saying that he really didn't like doing it. Was like his least favorite thing to do. And he just set the tone for that meeting, that it was like, well, okay, where do we go from here? You don't like doing these. You did it begrudgingly. You don't give, on a scale of 1 to 5, you don't give 4s and 5s. You can't explain how to get a 405 or what it means. And so, having, I think, someone who would have taken the time to be an engaged listener and understand what was important, not just from me, but from others that worked for him, were direct reports of his, and pay attention to how he was responding. And like you said, I think you started this by focusing on the person that you're talking to, right? And getting his attention. I think the reason he didn't have one-on-ones is it was difficult to ever get his attention. And so all the things that we're talking about, if it's difficult for you to do that, and you are not interested in intentionally making changes that allow you to do these things, then it probably is better that you not have the one-on-ones, because you'll create a situation that actually could make things worse than they are.
Well, I think it's very interesting, because this is very appropriate. How, I mentioned when you started talking about active listening, and then I started speaking about keeping the focus on the other person. How you re-engaged in the conversation was exactly that. You said, I think I'm hearing you say this. You were engaging in active listening, and then you added to it, which is how you're supposed to do it. I saw what you did there, but it's really interesting. People don't understand how important that is. They're more concerned about sharing whatever thought, like you said, comes into their head, or their experience. And it's funny, because I really got hyper focused on this when I became a coach, because it's one of the key skills in coaching. And I remember part of my education was just watching people engage in, they probably thought I was a weirdo, but watching people engage in conversations. And it was fascinating to me to see when somebody came with a concern, and how the conversation somehow morphed into the other person's concern. I was like, wow, there really is a lot of validity in making sure you keep the focus on the person with the concern. It helps build rapport. It strengthens communication. It strengthens your relationship with that person. When I used to teach this, I used to say, tell me about your best friend. And people go, oh, they listen well. What do you mean? And I say, right, the people that you're closest to are usually the people that listen well. It helps build rapport. So
I want to just add a little something so that people can understand what does focus look like, right? Or what does it feel like? What does it sound like? And focus, being fully engaged, is about being present, right? Being here, putting your phone away, turning off the notifications, telling your admin or executive assistant, I'm not to be bothered for this half an hour, whatever it is, right? It's about creating an environment where you can give the person your undivided attention. And then it's about making eye contact, right? Paying attention to your body language. 93% of communication is nonverbal. And so paying attention to what your body language is saying. Does your body language convey interest or disinterest, right? Does it convey that you are angry or closed off, right? As opposed to being open. And so pain is not just you not interrupting someone and talking over them. It's the totality of your comportment, your physicality, and what it's conveying, since that's the majority of communication. The words that you're speaking, when you speak them, are vitally important, but how you are receiving the information says something to the person that's speaking to you. And if they start to get the feeling that you're disinterested, right, that you're distracted, it's going to make it difficult to build that rapport, for them to believe that you care about what's happening with them as an employee, as a person, that when you speak back to them, that it's about them and not solely about you. And so it takes all of these pieces, right? So that you are listening, you're engaged, you are asking questions to clarify and reframing what people have said to make sure that you're confirming understanding. And then if a response is appropriate, right, responding in a way that is engaging, again, that gives the now the listener, the receiver, who had been the message giver originally, it gives them the impression that you were in fact listening. And this helps with ultimately you being able to remember and retain what was said. And I will say this, taking notes can be helpful for this. I had someone that I worked for who took notes, which I think was an attempt to show, oh, I'm actively listening, but nothing was ever done with those notes. And I don't know whatever happened to them. But weeks later, you would have a conversation to revisit something that happened in that meeting. And it was like you had to start from scratch all over again. So you want to be careful. Yes, taking notes can be helpful to help you remember, but you've got to do something with those notes. Revisit them, log them, do something so that it is a tool that helps you remember what actually occurred in the meeting, and makes it possible for follow-up, if follow-up is a natural part of what you discussed in that meeting.
I just want, I know you get ready to move on, but I just want to say one thing about taking notes. And I went like this because I was like, some
I
people
don't ever have to move on. We can always do a two-parter. We're in control here.
It's true. Some people, when they take notes, their head is down the entire time and they're not making eye contact. That's why I went like this, because some they're like this the entire time. That's one thing. But the other thing that I do is I take notes. I let the person know, hey, I may take some notes, and it's not because I'm being rude, because if I have a thought, I write that thought down and then I continue to have eye contact with them so I don't interrupt them. That is the purpose. So you can use notes. Using notes is good if you have a specific targeted way you're going to
Yeah.
use them.
I like that. I like that clarification. And so that just it's a good point. Um, let's see. Anything else on the active listening we want to make sure we cover?
No, I think I think that's a really strong foundation for active listening.
Awesome. All right. Then let's talk about aligning goals. And I know earlier you mentioned that you definitely have something to cover in this area.
Well, this is really getting back to connecting regular meetings, regular one-on-ones with the overall annual appraisal or the performance plan of this person. And I would frequently have these meetings with managers, and they would show me, well, since I worked in human resources, I was also the person that the employee came to when they didn't agree with what the manager was putting on their performance appraisal. And I remember mediating a meeting between the manager and the employee, and and I had gotten the appraisal. I'm reading through the appraisal, and I noticed that one incident kept popping up over and over again, and it was the reason why this manager was giving this person a low rating on a couple of things. And I said, explain to me why this one incident keeps popping up. It was the only one the manager could remember. So when you have your one-on-ones, keep a little note, a little digital note, like a folder with your employees' goals and challenges, and track them. Make sure you're keeping a running tab on how that employee is doing when it comes to that particular goal, and align those goals to their overall performance, any goals they have in their overall performance, the organizational goals, your departmental goals, so they're in sync. But really when something good happens, put a note in there. When something not so good happens, put a note in there, so that you're not, when you get to that at the end of the year and you're doing that performance appraisal, or in the middle of the year, depending on how you do it in your organization, you're not racking your brain to figure out what this person achieved during the year, what challenges they had during the year. You're keeping that regular running tab, and you're aligning those things with the overall performance goals of that person. I cannot tell you how ridiculous that conversation was. And I was like, look, I'm a neutral party here, but I have to agree with the employee. You're using one incident. I said, well, what about the other things that happened throughout the year? And the manager could not. And here's the thing: it was the recency bias. It was something that happened, fairly recent, and it was the only thing that manager could recall. And so it was just all over this performance appraisal. That was not a good way to do that.
So I actually have a great story on this, aligning on goals. Again, with a manager that I didn't have regular, I'm not going to say we didn't have regular one-on-ones. We had regular for us, right? So again, at the point at which I began working for this person, I had been in the position that I had for 12 years or so. And so my boss at this point I knew my job, trusted me to do my job. And so I just think she didn't feel it was necessary that we needed to have regular one-on-ones. And she had them with everyone else. And when I say regular, she was having weekly one-on-ones with everyone else. We did not need that kind of touching base. We did have sort of impromptu, she would stop in my office, I would stop in her office, and we would just sort of chat about things that were going on. But we didn't have anything regularly scheduled. When we did have some things scheduled, however, what I noticed in this area is that she was really good about she was really good about making notes
Mm.
of what was happening with people, the positives, particularly the positives. And so when the annual reviews came around, not only did she have a wholly different attitude about the annual review, it was the place that started, what are the goals for the year? What are you going to be working on for the upcoming year? And she did the same thing with new employees, right? So, and I think this is a huge, a great place to start. New employees, and at the annual review, you sit down, have a discussion about the goals, the organization's goal, the strategic plan of the organization, how your department, and what aspects of the strategic plan your department is responsible for. And then you break that down. Who's responsible for which aspects of the strategic plan,
Right.
right? So everyone is clear about what the organization is, where the organization is going, what the organization's plans are. And then taking the time to understand what your employees' goals are. And then finding a way to align their goals with the organization's goals. So when it comes to things like professional development, personal development, what are the skills, the knowledge, the experiences that they need to have that's going to ultimately serve the strategic plan, right? And so that's what we're talking about when we're saying aligning the goals. You have to understand what the organization is doing and where it's going, and then looking at what your employees are, what their current job is, where there are gaps in their experiences, their knowledge base, etc., that actually serves the strategic plan, and then making sure that you're filling those gaps. And if there are things that they are moving towards personally, right, outside of just in their role, that can be brought into aligning goals. That's how you get, I was training the other day, and the topic was about terminating employees, like legally terminating employees. And we spent very little time talking about the actual legal aspects of getting rid of people. It was more about this, setting up how to get the best from people. Because if you are proactive in getting the best from them, you're going to minimize the problems that you have that ultimately lead to performance issues and termination. So it goes hand in hand. I think some of them thought we were going to talk about how to just jettison people. And there was some discussion of that. But, taking the time, new employees, the annual evaluation process, understanding what it is that the employees want and need, their personal goals, their professional goals, and how it connects to where your organization is going based on what your department's role in that is hugely important. And she was really good at that aspect, and throughout the year keeping track of all the good things that were happening, the classes that you took, the experiences that you had that fed that, and then in the evaluation, actually making note in the evaluations of very specific things that were in there. The other thing that she did that I thought was really important is that she asked, what are the things that you've done throughout the year so that she could, compare and contrast what she had and to make sure that she didn't miss anything that you might have thought was important that moved you in the direction of your goals and serving the organization. And so I think sometimes what gets lost is, you say align the goals, and people think, well, their goals have nothing to do with the organization. And then that's not true, right? First of all, you have to ask them.
Right.
You have to ask them what they want, what's important. And then you need to sit again looking at what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is your department trying to achieve? What is the goals of your department that are in pursuit of the strategic plan and vision of the organization? Because every department serves that in some way. And so it's like extrapolating backwards. It's right, or moving it back, moving it backwards. So it's like you're looking at the big picture out here, and then you're working your way backwards to see, how do I fit into this? What do I want? And so one of the things that, just this personal example, at some point I made a decision that I was going to be leaving that organization. And there were some things that I wanted to learn and reinforce. At the time, I was in grad school where I met you. And it's like, I'm going to be moving in a different direction than what the work that I was doing for them. But one of the things that they needed was more development of staff. And I was like, I'm willing to take that on. I wanted the experiences, right? So that was for me personally, but it also developed me professionally, and it served the needs of the organization, which was to start to develop a pipeline of employees that would be able to replace. I was leaving, my boss was leaving. We knew we were on a timeline for retirement from there. And so developing a pipeline. And so I got to do something that was important to me. It served the organization. It helped with their goals. And the people that we hired, one person with the intent that he would backfill my position when I left. And then I had created an intern program. And the last intern that we hired ultimately was hired by by that organization, right? I got something out of it, which was to develop a program.
Sure.
And I hadn't directly managed or supervised staff for some years, and to have some recency with actually managing staff, the program and the learning and development aspect of that. So it was a win-win-win all around, right? They got someone, that person is still working there, doing a great job, I understand. Right. And so if you take the time to find out what's important to people, you can find a way to make a connection and not worry that they're going to, you're going to invest something in someone and then they're just going to up and leave.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Great point.
So we are actually going to make this a two-parter.
Okay.
Because in order to not go beyond an hour, we're going to have to wrap it up now. So we're going to end here on aligning goals. This was not originally the plan, but we're having such a great conversation around this that, and I think it's important to share the stories and not just rattle off the bullet points. So And I hope you will agree as you are listening and watching that the deeper insights are helpful for you. So we're going to continue this with a part two. And so for now, we'll what we covered was the importance of having one-on-ones, being prepared, active listening, and aligning goals. Right. So
Fantastic.
with that, we are going to wrap up today and we will continue with the remainder of this topic the next time we are in front of you, which will be next Thursday. Yes, next Thursday,
Thursday.
3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. But in the meantime, Robert, if someone wanted to connect with you prior to a meeting next week, how could they go about doing that?
They can email me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can go to my website, Robert Hilliard Coaching, and fill out the contact form there. Tell me what goals, tell me what challenges you have, and we can set up a discovery conversation and see how I can help you.
Awesome. And if you want to connect with me, you can do so at shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. There is a form there for you as well. Feel free to complete it. And in the meantime, if you are doing one-on-ones, we would love to hear from you on how the first few tips that we've talked about, how are you implementing those? And if there are others that you are using, you never know. They might be the ones we're talking about next week. You might have some that go beyond what even we have come up with. So drop a note for either of us. You can do that here on LinkedIn, or you could reach out through the platforms that we mentioned previously. So with that, we want to thank you again for being here. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can find out when we're going live. If you're watching on LinkedIn, all right, leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. So until next time, take care.
Bye now.